Praise the Lord. We welcome all the people that's got their TVs turned on out there today in our broadcast. We're in some end-time teachings on some very important instructions from the Lord. It's recorded in the Bible. We're trying to talk about Ishmael's seed, the Arabian people, over around Iraq and Saudi Arabia and Iran, Jordan, Syria, many places, Egypt, many places where those Arabian people are gathered today. The Lord had a plan in the making for these people to use them in a time coming up in His indignation against Israel. Now, as we speak these things about God's indignation against Israel, let me just kind of summarize it just a little bit as I'm going to narrate as much as I can. Due to Israel running in under other nations, back on the days of Moses and even before and after, even Joshua's time and places that had a hard time with Israel, they would leave the first covenant that Moses had and the Levite priesthood and go out among other nations and take wives and follow them in their things that happened. But then came the day that the Lord wanted to bring indignation against them. That would be the end time. Now, all the things we're going to be reading about today is not right now, presently, right like today or tomorrow. But it covers an end time space of time that things will mature to the place that God will close out the ages with these different things that He has ordained. Now, He ordains the evil and the good. A lot of people are not aware of that. God creates light and He creates darkness. And everything that He is made, He makes it, began it. And then only by its seed and by regeneration does it continue to this day. Talking about Ishmael's birth, as we look to my left on the board, I will try to get ourselves tuned in with this. Generations after the flood, we use this same thing that happened with Abraham, Sarah, and Isaac. In the good realm, the promised seed coming down to Christ in that realm. We're leaving that off right now. We're going to go over to the place before Abraham got his name changed from Abram to Abraham to father the nations under Christ. Then the believers comes in under this. Over here is a group of people. As we come where Abram took on Hagar, the bondsmaid, Sarah, doing she was barren, she gave her handmaid to Abraham to raise up seed. So from the seed of Abram and Hagar, the bondservant, she was out of Egypt, came Ishmael, the bondson. And God, He's the father, I would say, of the Arabian nations. They all surround the area that we're talking about today. 12 princes would come out of him, and they've got these different countries. Back in his days, there's different names than there are now. I could go to those princes' names for you in Genesis here, but you wouldn't understand them as of today. But all these things is going to happen in the last day. He will have 12 princes or 12 nations be of the Ishmael lineage, and it will come into its fullness in the last day. The Arab nations come out of all these different princes. Wherever they located, Iraq, Iran, where all your trouble is today, it's in that under the Ishmael seed. Now with Ishmael's seed, under that the seed of Ishmael, the Arabs, they wanted a religion. So there was one born by the name of Muhammad, and that's the religion that the Arabian people has taken on themselves. That's the reason the terrorists are fighting all today, because of this Muhammad, the Muslim, the Islam teaching. Muhammad is the one that started the Muslim teaching and has Islam as the God of that religion. And it's a different God than what we have under Abraham and coming under Sarah and Isaac. We have God, Jehovah God, and then coming out through them and Jacob and all came Jesus. And he bringing in other people into the Abrahamic covenant through Jesus. But over here on the covenant, and God spoke to Hagar and said about Ishmael what he would be. We'll go there right now and read on that area of teaching. In the 16th chapter of the book of Genesis, we will turn in our Bibles and read where the angel of the Lord said unto unto Hagar, began to talk to her. Verse 7, and the angel of the Lord of the 16th chapter of Genesis, and the angel of the Lord found her, which is Hagar, by a fountain of water in the wilderness. That's desert. When it speaks of wilderness, it's always referring to desert country. By the fountain in the way of Shur. And he said, Hagar, which was the bondmaid that Abram went into, Sarai's maid, whence camest thou? The angel asked Hagar, where did you come from? And whither wilt thou go? And she said, I flee from the face of my mistress Sarai. Verse 9, and the angel of the Lord said unto her, return to thy mistress and submit thyself under her hands. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, I will multiply thy seed, telling Hagar, I'll multiply thy seed exceedingly. There's a lot of Arabians come out from that Ishmael seed, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. And there's lots of Arabian people in the land. There's a lot of trouble overseas where they're at, and they don't mind bumming each other or other people. There's lots of them there, and they're under teaching that they will get rewarded for killing other people that come into their territory or try to cause them trouble. Verse 11, and the angel of the Lord said unto her, behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has heard thy affliction. Now, the angel was talking to Hagar, the bondmaid that came out of Egypt. Verse 12, and he will be a wild man. Speaking of Ishmael, he'll be a wild man. That means he's uncontrollable, not peaceable. He will be something that will be cause trouble, and he'll be a violent type of man. And his seed from him will be that kind of people. That's the reason you've got the Arabians over there around Iraq. We call them terrorists, a lot of them, Iran and different places, where they'll do anything to fight for their religion and for their land that they have, and they don't want other people around where they're at. They want to claim that country for their own. And says about Ishmael what he would be. He shall be a wise man. His hand will be against every man. And that's any other nation. He'll be against them or any other man. And every man's hand against him. There will be wars and rumors of wars and troubles through these Arabian people. He shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. And all the Arabians, they live around each other. Iran, Iraq, they're all along the Euphrates River, the Tigris River. They're all in that vicinity of the country where Babylon started in that area. And all these different people came into being out of this promise that he dwell among his brethren. And we're going to read now and go over to another place that we want you to consider. We want to go to a place where Jesus taught before we go any further into the religious area of the teachings. We want to go to the book of Matthew, where I read in our last teachings, Matthew chapter 24, which a lot of us have read many times. And we probably didn't take it as the Lord gave it out in his teachings. In Matthew 24, as Jesus was teaching on the end time, he was teaching what would be in the last day. And he began to narrate some of his teachings to this area of land over there around Iraq and Iran, and where the Arabians were. And a lot of his teachings go to that place. And Israel is going to be persecuted by these people in what we call the indignation, what the Lord called is indignation or anger or wrath against Israel for running out from among the Lord and not accepting Christ, and for the things that God had against them. He set forth a space of time for Israel to be chastised or to have trouble with other nations. Now, we're going to read from verse 7, a little bit of the 24th chapter of Matthew. And here's where Jesus is talking. Well, verse 6. Ye shall hear wars and rumors of wars, and that's happening over around Iraq and Iran, and that's for the last day teaching. It's not for things that's done past like World War I or World War II. That's not where he's going. His mind is on the area of teaching is over there around Israel or Jerusalem, and where they join also the Arabian nations, the PLO and all. We've heard names like that before, and Gaza Strip and all those different things where the Jews have gotten land that they claim is the Arabians' land, the PLO land, and those people's land. Anyway, they don't like Israel, and the Lord has set their heart against Israel to accomplish what he wants done to them in the last day. Now he says, there be wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled. Verse 6 of the 24th chapter of Matthew. For all these things must come to pass. Now that's all got to come to pass, but the end is not yet. So the end of time not yet, when all this trouble happens over there around Iraq and Iran and among Jerusalem and Israel, and the trouble they're having in that country over there and has had for some time. It's increased some in these last days that we could know as last days more than days preceding this. Verse 7, for nation shall rise against nation. That's over that area. Now that's not here in the United States or Britain or anything like that. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. Now that's these various kingdoms, whether it be the Arabian kingdom against Israel's kingdom, nation against nation. The United States gets in on it too, as far as that goes. And all the world is being involved in the war around those Arabian people over there. And a lot of things is leading up to the Battle of Armageddon, which will be around Jerusalem, and the Arabian nations will be fighting in that area prior to the Lord Jesus coming back. And he begins to guide us in that direction. And there should be famines, he says in the 7th verse of 24th chapter of Matthew. There'll be famines and pestilences in that land, in that area over there. And earthquakes in divers places, more in those regions than it is in any other place. All these are the beginning of sorrows that's come upon Israel, and he's directing his language toward Israel and by his disciples, and telling them for the Jews to beware. And you know, he said many things at various times concerning this. He said, the time will come you desire to see the day of the Son of Man, and shall not see it. When your enemy shall enclose you about, and you will be compassed by your enemy, then you will desire the day of the Son of Man, and you won't get to see it because you're going to face trouble. He gave warnings in these same type of teachings, and we're trying to bring these to you in these teachings here. Now, he's talking to Israel here, or to the fleshly Jew. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted. That's the people around Jerusalem and in Israel and Judea, around those areas. And shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations. The Jew will be for my name's sake. Now that's the Israelites and the Jew will be hated of all nations for his name's sake, because he bears the name of God and he bears the name of the Lord. These other nations bear the name of Mohammed, and they're against God. So they're going to be against him. It's a religious type of war that's going to be in the end time. As we address this, I hope you can understand where we're going to and pick up on what Jesus is saying. He's referring to the very thing we're trying to teach about the Arabian nations coming out through Ishmael and all. There'll be a wild type of people, violent people, a warring type of people. And we read last time to you that it showed him he would be an archer, which would carry the bow and represents war and all. So as we read some of these things, it tells Israel what they're going to be happening to them. Verse 10, and then shall many be afflicted, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. Over there in that area of places, there'll be a lot of betraying, because there's, in among this is going to be God's religion and Muhammad's religion, Ali religion. They're contrary to each other. And these nations are trained and bred to have a type God. The Arabian people are trained to have Ali and Mohammedanism and Muslim type of religion in their teaching. Muhammad picked this up, some of it in the teaching, because he went out among some of the Jews and found out under Moses' law that God, Jehovah, was their God. And they found also that Jesus was being taught by the apostles, disciples, and he went out and he, as a vagabond and one that traded, he traveled a lot, Muhammad did. He found out a lot about religions. He found out about some of the religious teachings that I've been reading of lately, some of the things that we're wanting to get over to you, and that I see from the Scriptures, and we're going to try to get in the Scriptures on some of these, that the religions there, they like their God. The Jew religion claimed Jehovah God. And they claimed that God led them out of Egypt and brought them in and gave them the land of Canaan. And so they've had fights over that land of Canaan with the Arabians and with the Philistines. They was all Arabians, of course. And those different Chaldeans and all these different names back in those days was of these Arabian sects of people. Today they're called by different nationalities or different sects. Today they're divided in different sects itself, but they all believe in their God. And Israel still believes that God is going to help them and that the Messiah will come to Israel. They think he will. They think Elijah will come and sit there at the table. They got a chair spread for him. They tell me over there in Israel, looking for Elijah to come back. But Elijah came already in the form of John the Baptist. And when John the Baptist came, that was Elijah to come back. And Jesus tells them so. And we'll get to that later in more Scripture. But talking about the area of conflict, it's going to be over there around Israel, with them fighting against the Arabians, and they've been warring for some time over the last few years, and Israel has to fight these PLO and all. They try to take the Israel's land, and Israel try to battle back and get the land back, and so there's hatred going on. But in the main thing that's causing the war is their religion. The Muslim religion under Mohammedanism has spread throughout the earth, and they have a large population, and they've tried to conquer the world. And they believe that they will, that Allah, their God, will be the one that will conquer everything and bring everything unto them. And so there's a lot of ideas that they do have on their doctrine. But now as we read to you here, verse 10, and then shall many be offended, shall betray one another, shall hate one another. That's over that area there. That's not over here where we're talking about. And many false prophets shall rise and shall deceive many. And many false prophets, and they're coming out of Mohammed, some of it, Mohammed, Muslims, and others is in under that area that Jesus is referring to. Shall arise, shall deceive many. And because iniquity, evil shall abound, iniquity, the love of many shall wax cold. So there'll be a lot of warring going on, and a lot of fighting, and a lot of trouble in all the land, especially in that part of the land. But he that shall endure unto the end of all these events and these wars and things, the same shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness, and to all nations for a witness, and then shall the end come. The end of the world will come after this gospel has been preached to all the world as a witness. Even in those troublous places, there's going to be a lot of things happening there. So we're going to drop down just a little bit further and read from verse 15 of speaking about the indignation of the Lord and the armies encamping about Jerusalem. Verse 15, when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet. We're going to be reading in Daniel what it says. And those by the prophet Daniel, you see the abomination of desolation. Well, the abomination that maketh desolate is going to be there in the temple, around the temple in Jerusalem, where the abomination is going to be set up of desolation. Stand in the holy place, that's Jerusalem. And when you see that abomination, when you see a false Christ come in there and sit in the temple there in Jerusalem, then you know the abomination of desolation is going to stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. Now you got to understand what he's saying about what's going to happen in that time around Jerusalem. Then let them which shall be in Judea flee into the mountain. Now if you're in the land of Judah, the tribe of Judah, Judea, Jerusalem is a part of that Judea territory, or the land, tribe of Judah territory. If you're in the land of Judah, or Judea, around Jerusalem, flee into the mountains, because these terrible armies are going to come down, and they're going to have that same wild nature that Ishmael had in him, and they're going to come down to fight against Israel and against their God, and try to put their God as up front over anything that Israel ever had. Now, verse 17, that him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house, because this thing is going to happen quickly, and you don't have time to go and get anything. Anyway, you have to flee out of that land, because there's some evil people going to come in there by the multitudes, Arabians and all coming in to fight against Israel and to try to take over that place. He said, neither let him which are in the field return back to take his clothes, but get on out of that area. That's where the trouble is going to be. Not going to be over here in the United States. It's going to be around Israel and the Arabian countries, right where you're having trouble now with Iraq and Iran. All that's going to progress, and that's getting us closer to the end time when the armies are going to come and fight Israel down there in Jerusalem. Now, verse 20 says, pray ye that your flight be not in the winter time. That's a bad time to have to go out in the winter into the mountains where snow and cold weather is. Neither on the Sabbath day, because they couldn't take a Sabbath day journey under Moses' law, which is a little over a mile, and so don't pray that it won't be on that day. For then shall be great tribulation, which as was not since the beginning of the world. That's going to be such troublous time, because the Lord, these armies are prepared to come and cause trouble in that area of the land over there. And it's going to be such trouble that's never been since the beginning of the world. To this time, no nor ever shall be, because this is the climax of all things. The false gods, false prophets are going to be with armies, bringing their armies against the God of Israel and against the Lord's people in those days. Now, verse 22, and except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, the ones that God is elected to save, those days shall be shortened. If it didn't, these people would destroy all the land, because they're a wild type of people, and under their God they won't spare anything. Today they'll bum anybody they can. They even tie bums to the children and go in and bum people. And in various countries, and even in Baghdad and around those countries, to this day they're having what they call terrorists, different sects of terrorists that's mean and wild and destroy. And that will keep multiplying, and these are going to be bad days. And there's going to be no shortening of this. These things are going to come to its full in time ahead. Now, verse 23 gets to the place that we're going to want you to take notice to, of chapter 24, verse 23. Then if any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is Christ, or there, or oh, he's over there, believe it not. If somebody says, Christ is here, lo, he's here, or he's over there, in another section, maybe in the temple of Jerusalem, or over here in Iraq, or somewhere else, among the Arabians, or wherever. But he says, believe it not. In verse 24, for there shall arise false Christs. And they're going to come out of the main ones. It's coming out of the Mohammed religion, coming into the land of Israel. Okay, our time is caught up with us. Until next time, you keep praying and seeking the Lord, and the Lord give you understanding in these teachings.